join us in a spirit of meditation, reflection, or prayer as we deepen into our service and share our opening words for this morning by the poet Jane Mays. Activate your SPS. There is something within us that calls us, beckons us back to peace and love, an invisible homing device, a spiritual positioning system, always set to return us home. Homing pigeons have it instinctively. We have this set to spiritual default, sometimes overriding the directions and veering off course by misguided choices or distractions. We may cause it to recalculate, but it automatically tries to redirect us unless we disable it by our willfulness. May we be called back to peace and love this morning. Today, our story for all ages is Under the Dome of the Church Lady. Checkout's full to capacity and in a hurry to go somewhere, anywhere but shopping. She heads for the 10 items or less line with a meager 4 in her cart. Ahead is a man with cart overfilled, but she knows the clerk will turn him away. So she waits patiently at first. He greets the clerk brightly as he empties the cart bottom furtively, as if she won't notice or can't count. The clerk methodically registers the illegal purchases through like an automaton. Church Lady begins to think of alternative ways to interrupt this transaction. Should she politely point out the 10 items or less sign? Suggest he go to another checkout? Offer to help him move his cart out of the way? Sarcastically ask the other people in line if they have a deck of cards to while away the time? Cough loudly and impatiently, call him an inconsiderate jerk, insist on speaking with the manager, organize the now lengthening line to revolt, scream like a kamikaze pilot as she rams her cart into his and pummels his body to a pulp. Being a refined and gentle soul, loving of God, the environment, and the poor and hungry and faraway places, she gives evidence of the peace in her heart, and with incredible control, she glares with soul-damaging beams of white-hot heat fixed on his very being and piercing his left eye, which renders him unable to turn and face the cold stares of shoppers less Christian than she. The survivor loads his pregnant cart, pays $271.58, and leaves with head held high, knowing he is a winner and deserving of deference. Church Lady leaves the store with angry, flushed face, heart pounding from the heavy burden she carries in her bag of 4 items and $271.58 worth of uncharitable thoughts of considered mayhem. Once home, she unloads the 4 items, but carries her smoldering ill will on her fitness walk to the dinner table and into bed. In the morning, she continues to carry her load of resentment and ill will, along with the daily word booklet of morning prayers, Bible readings, and inspirational thoughts as she prays for sinners in faraway lands to be saved, and that her grandchildren will learn to be kind and patient. Our next reading today is from The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Does the past take up a great deal of your attention? Do you frequently talk and think about it either positively or negatively? The great things that you have achieved, your adventures or your experiences, or your victim story, and the dreadful things that were done to you, or maybe what you did to someone else. Are your thought processes creating guilt, pride, resentment, anger, regret, or self-pity? Then you are not only reinforcing a false sense of self, but also helping to accelerate your body's aging process by creating an accumulation of past in your psyche. Verify this for yourself by observing those around you who have a strong tendency to hold on to the past. Die to the past every moment. You don't need it. Only refer to it when it is absolutely relevant to the present. Feel the power of this moment and the fullness of being. Feel your presence.
Molly Ann Stinson is an oddly compelling comedian on YouTube. In one of my favorite videos, she shares tips on dealing with stupid people. If you think you share my sense of humor, I suggest looking her up. She begins with a suggestion that you feed stupid people Krispy Kreme donuts. At worst, it will give you 5 minutes of quiet while they chew, At best, it might lead to a sugar crash nap, which buys you 2 hours of peace. She ends the video saying that while you can't fix stupid, you can distract it. Naturally, as Unitarian Universalists invested in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, we try to have right thoughts and right speech, and we would never label people as stupid. But still, I like the idea of distracting stupidity. I'm personally inclined to fight things head on. Why try anything else when you can hit it with a hammer? My children can attest to this for better and for worse. Once when they were younger, a friend asked, "Is there anything you won't discuss with them?" And this is something I love about interim ministry. I am free to name what I am seeing. And sometimes you all affirm what I see, and sometimes you tell me I'm full of nonsense. Sometimes you agree with me that something needs to change, and sometimes you don't, or you don't have the energy to do anything about it right now. Sometimes we collectively see a way forward, and sometimes we are stymied. But I love that we can be direct with one another. I know that it helps me to grow. I remember attending a workshop on leadership once, where the instructors outlined different styles of leadership. They made the point that one size does not fit all. For instance, if you are on the 3rd floor of a building engulfed in flames, you don't want the firefighter who has arrived to rescue you to engage in a collaborative shared decision-making process. You want that firefighter to make executive decisions based on their expertise, and wanting to live, you will do what you are told. Change strategies are similar. One size does not fit all. We are able to choose from a multiplicity of effective strategies and decide which approach might be the most effective in a given circumstance. When we contemplate change lately, we notice that the narrative threads in our country grow increasingly more disturbing. We see remarkable mental gymnastics engaged to normalize the absurd. Reason, a value that Unitarian Universalists hold dear, has left the building. There have been moments and continue to be moments that I think we are all fearing that violence may replace discourse. But as a person who aspires to be a pacifist, I always have feelers out for alternatives to violence. One of the most intriguing is something I heard once and have never been able to corroborate. I read that the American Friends Service Committee offered to buy all the Jewish people from Hitler. The story goes that he told them that no country would let them in, even if he went along with their idea. And after World War II, Hitler proved to be mostly right about that piece. Whether it actually happened or not, I love the creativity of that effort to change history. Some years ago, I read the Hunger Games trilogy by Suzanne Collins. You will remember that it was hugely popular. If you did not read the books, the basic plot is that 24 children are chosen annually by lottery to partake in the Hunger Games, where children fight to the death until only one remains. An elaborate mini-world is created for the games. I really dislike the books for several reasons. A child fighting to the death is obviously problematic, but I also kept waiting for the protagonist, Katniss, to step out of the game, to refuse the rules, to reject the premise, but she never did. She works to survive and to help a few people, but from within the game. I wonder how often we do that, stick with the rules of the game when we ought to be rejecting the entire premise. I wonder how often we beat our heads against brick walls with the foolish notion that if we do it long enough, something will shift. I very much dislike when people of goodwill accept the premise and fight back using the same despicable tools. I like the stories in real life where people have changed things up, and I'd like to share some of those stories. The first is about the town of Wunsiedel, Germany, and their woes with neo-Nazis. Rudolf Hess, one of Adolf Hitler's chief deputies, had been buried in Wunsiedel. Every year, right-wing extremists marched through the town in August to commemorate Hess on the anniversary of his death. The lease on his grave expired in 2011, and the town declined to renew it. Hess's family exhumed the body, had it cremated, and spread the ashes at sea. The town hoped that with the body gone, that would be the end of the right-wing extremists, but alas, no. They continued to arrive every August despite peaceful counter-protests. At some point, the town decided to distract stupidity. So in 2014, they hatched a plan, which was written up like this. Without the marchers' knowledge, local residents and businesses sponsored the 250 participants of the march in what was dubbed Germany's most involuntary walkathon. For every meter the neo-Nazis walked, money went to a program called Exit Deutschland, which helps people to escape extremist groups. Campaigners hung humorous posters to make the march look more like a sporting event, with slogans such as, "If only the viewer knew," and "Mein Mampf," which translates to "my munch," next to a table laden with bananas. They even hung a sign at the end thanking the marchers for their donations. The right-wing extremists were met with cheering crowds, since every step raised money for a good cause. I like how the town got creative in their resistance to right-wing ideologies. They changed the game in an attempt to change the story. Another town that shifted the narrative was Billings, Montana. The Jewish Telegraphic Agency wrote it up saying, in 1993, Billings was rocked by a year of racism and ethnic hatred. White supremacists moved in, spewing hate mail, death threats, and vandalism against Native Americans, Blacks, and Jews. Anti-Jewish hate flyers appeared, and the Jewish cemetery was vandalized right before Rosh Hashanah. On December 2nd of that year, a brick was thrown through the bedroom window of a 5-year-old Jewish boy, Isaac Schnitzer, who was displaying a Hanukkah menorah. Horrified, the town responded. The Billings Gazette printed a full-page menorah, which thousands of citizens pasted in their own windows in a show of solidarity that was trumpeted by the world media as an example of how one small community stood up to hate. I remember businesses also posted "Not in our town" on their marquees, and there were other efforts as well. Did the extremists in either story go away? Did bigotry end? Of course not. But for a while, people could imagine a different world, and the conversation shifted. And we are so desperately in need right now of a different conversation and a better story. One of the most powerful story reclamations I've heard came from the library community. Troy, Michigan was hard hit in the last recession. Troy had a popular, well-run library. About 3/4 of the people polled felt that the library should be fully funded despite the recession. When it came time to vote for those funds, however, they kept voting against the library. It turned out that Citizens United was behind those votes, framing the discussion as one of taxes and convincing voters that their money was at risk. It came down to one final vote, but here is where the discussion was reframed. Reporter Eric Jaffe tells us what happened next. True to form, Citizens United, represented at public debates by soon-to-be Mayor Janice Daniels, opposed the proposal on anti-tax grounds. But this time, they were joined in their opposition by a committee called Safeguarding American Families, which said it was rooting for the vote to lose so it could throw a book burning party once the library closed. Yeah, that's right, a book burning party. Safeguarding American Families printed up signs that said, "Vote to close Troy Library August 2nd, book burning party August 5th. They planted them on lawns, and when the signs got torn up, they replaced them with new ones. They took out an ad in the Troy Times for a clown and an ice cream vendor to serve as additional entertainment. They started a Facebook page and a Twitter account. Needless to say, some people got a little angry. They left comments on the committee's social media sites like, "You people are sick, and this is disgusting," and "cheap imbeciles," and the like. Leaders took notice, then newspapers, then TV stations, Everyone filed the story under fact. Actually, it belonged in fiction. The whole thing was a hoax. Safeguarding American Families was an invention of the Leo Burnett Advertising Agency, which had been hired to create a blitz media campaign that would encourage voters to turn out and approve the library funding proposal. Just before the election, Safeguarding American Families revealed its true message. A vote against the library is like a vote to burn books. Leo Burnett says its goal was to change the conversation from taxes to libraries. And sure enough, come August 2nd, voter turnout was high, and the library proposal passed with 58% of the vote. The ad agency pulled off the whole stunt on a donated budget of about $3,500. It's likely the library would have closed if they had stayed in the game that Citizens United was playing, if they tried to argue about money. Instead, they refused the premise and shifted the narratives to books and ideas. So let me share one last story about people changing the narrative. And this story originated on the program The Moth. And The Moth is a radio and podcast program where people share their stories. The writer, Jim O'Grady, tells his story. And I have changed a few words to make it Sunday morning friendly. It's the mid-90s, and I'm living out in a beach bungalow. And I look out the window one day, and I see three large men in black suits and shades standing in front of a Lincoln Town Car. And I know right away they're there to do one of three things: beat me up, kill me, or more likely, make me think that they're there to beat me up or kill me. So I flash back right away to the week before, where I had bumped into Mr. X in the local diner. And seeing me had reminded him that the day before I had been on the local news insulting him. So he raised his slicked head from his steak and eggs, and he said to me, "You should remember that I can have you taken care of." And there was something in the way he said "taken care of" that I knew he didn't mean it tenderly. So I'm living at the time in a beautiful place with tree-lined lanes. My neighbors are retirees and railroad workers and immigrants. The problem is we're all in court fighting Mr. X about whether the residents should stay or go. We're fighting for our homes. The other problem is that I am very poor at risk assessment. So it's my name on the op-ed calling Mr. X greedy, and it is my face on TV calling him an aesthetic cretin. I was very proud of that phrase. And that's how come three men are standing outside my window. And I try to work. I'm a writer. I go back, but I'm going back and forth to the window and looking out over hours. And as I'm doing this, I think two things. I have a simple thought process. One, being a wise guy is boring. The whole time they're standing there listening to the birds chirp and checking out their manicures. The other thing I think is about a guy I'd read about named Clarence Jordan, a white man who founded an interracial farming commune in rural Georgia in 1942. And this got the attention of the local Ku Klux Klan. So every now and then at night, they would come by, shoot a shotgun, or throw a firebomb at the houses. So Clarence had a problem, but Clarence was a disciple of nonviolence. So he did one thing that you do, is you try to find some mundane human activity that you share with your enemy and use it to make them see you as a person. So one day he's at the local post office and he sees some Klan guys and he goes over and he says, "Hey fellas, are you married?" And they go, "Yeah." And he says, "Children? Do you have children?" And they go, "Sure." And he says, "Well, you know how when a baby wakes in the night and is fussing and you just can't get it back to sleep and you're up until dawn?" And they say, "Oh yeah, God." And he said, "Well, when you shoot at us, it wakes the babies and we have a hard time getting them to go back to sleep." So I take that thought and I combine it with my complete lack of common sense. And instead of calling the cops, I go out my front door. And I go up to the three guys and I say to the big guy in the middle, "You've been out here for a while now. Do you need the bathroom?" And nobody moves a muscle. And the big guy says, "No, we're good." And I think, darn Clarence Jordan, now what? And I said, "Well, are you hungry?" And this is a quote. This is an exact quote from the big guy. He says, "Well, to be honest with you, I would not say no to a bowl of lentil soup." And that's how it starts. 20 minutes later, the four of us are around my little kitchen table. And it turns out they're not even mobsters. They're unemployed construction workers. They've taken this job from Mr. X because they're hoping he'll hire them to build the McMansions once he kicks us off the land and razes our houses. So the soup is not enough to get them on my side, but it's enough that they tell me Mr. X is a jerk who pays them next to nothing and made them get man manicures because he thought it would make them look threatening. And so the end of the story is that we came up with a system for the afternoons when it got really tedious for these guys. One of them would take the car to the end of the lane and be the lookout, and the other would hang out on my couch, watch my TV, and take a nap. And I was writing a book. I kind of liked their company. And this went on for 4 or 5 days or so until Mr. X was satisfied that I'd been terrified enough. And I'm not going to exaggerate and say that me and these guys became friends, because we didn't. But I really do think, I don't know, here's what I think. We did share some mundane human activities. And I think that if Mr. X, after that first day, after the soup, had asked them to harm me, I think they would have told him to take his $6 an hour and shove it up his bottom. So what these stories all have in common is that the people involved decided to reframe what was happening. They rejected the premise. They did not accept stupidity as reality, and they told a different story. They did not call names. They did not engage in violence. They did not confront anything head on, and they did not use a hammer. Sometimes they used humor. Sometimes they went for compassion. They asked people to imagine something better. They used imagination and wit and love. They stubbornly remained in the world they wanted to inhabit. And I'm wondering if we too might employ some of these strategies to change the story in our country and in our state and in our towns. Is there a way to go around instead of through? Is there a way to step out of the game, change the rules, or change the premise? Are we willing to tell the story we want to inhabit, or slogging along in someone else's ridiculous story? What can we do in Bismarck and Mandan to distract stupid while we create the world we long for?
Winds be still, storm clouds pass and silence come. Peace grace this time with harmony. Fly birds of hope and shine light
We'll extinguish our chalice with words by the radio preacher Charles Swindoll, and then have one more beautiful piece of music by Alicia, where you can sit with all you have heard and felt today, or just be filled by the music. And then we'll break out into virtual coffee hour groups. This is a story about 4 people named everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. There was an important job to do, and everybody was asked to do it. Everybody was sure somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did. Somebody got angry because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought anybody would do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. Charles also said, "We are all faced with a series of great opportunities, brilliantly disguised as impossible situations. May we leave here excited to take advantage of our great opportunities as creatively as possible."
O come, Emmanuel, and with your captive children dwell. Give comfort to all exiles here, and to the aching heart bid cheer. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come within as love to dwell. Oh, come, you splendor very bright, as joy that never yields to might. Oh, come.